Welcome to Buy or Not Buy, a show that's been percolating in my head for a little while, where I take a look at an entire Transformers line and tell you whether or not I think each figure in it is worth a purchase. No, this is not just like one of my retrospectives. This is worse. I'm just going to use stock photos to make this one. I kind of wanted better visuals for this, but after Wednesday's video, I need a rest. What's the Best of the Best took 2 days to script and 13 straight hours just to film, not even taking into account the editing process. I had to change the battery on my camera 6 times, and I produced over 40 gigs of raw video. It took so long to make, I started rendering the video a minute after it was supposed to go live. I just about killed myself with that one, so I hope you can forgive the boring visuals. And let's get into the first episode of Buy or Not Buy, Legacy Year 1. But first, your likes. Please, maybe subscribe. Alright, Wave 1, Figure 1, Core Class Hot Rod. Buy or not buy? Stay the fuck away. Easily the worst core class they've ever produced, and one of the worst figures in general Hasbro has ever shit out, covered in bile and afterbirth. A toy beyond rancid and beneath your loathing. One crazy person got mad at me a week or two ago saying that this figure was awesome and I'm just a hater. My man, if this looks like anything other than a sin to you, you must be watching YouTube from hell. Weird, cause you'd think that the only social media allowed in perdition would be Twitter. Iguanas. This is a high tier buy. Pick this figure up. It is a core more posable than a lot of Voyagers with a silly ass awesome Power Rangers monster aesthetic. He's lugging around a bicycle on his back and the alt mode isn't amazing, but it's a really fun little guy. Got all the energy of Barney's rebellious son going through his punk phase and it's a great time. Core Class Skywarp. Mid-tier buy. A decent little guy, definitely worth the money. Obviously the third-party Legends versions are going to blow this out of the water like a couple redneck fishermen with too much gunpowder and even more irresponsible quantities of beer. But if you don't want to spend over $40 on a core class, then your only real problem with this thing is that the alt mode is a little soft. But it's better than I was expecting and solidly fun for the money. Deluxe Class Prime Universe Legacy is a buy, but only one. They made like a million versions of this thing, and it's not powerful enough to support 2 versions of itself existing in the same reality. That reality being your collection. So, like the villain at the end of Time Cop, having 2 just causes them to annihilate themselves, ruining both. Honestly, I don't hate the RC version, but probably every single other one is better to get than her because they didn't botch the proportions horribly for all intents and purposes with them. And yes, these are botched proportions. They didn't G1ify this, they just made her shorter than she's supposed to be. Buy a single version of this and pass on everything else. Especially Pissy. Deluxe Dragstrip is honestly not a buy at this point. He's a good figure on his own who fixes a lot of the issues that the base design is stuck with. Unfortunately, only 2/5 of the Legacy Stunticons are good, so unless you are a complete psychopath who only cares about Dragstrip and Motormaster, just don't bother. It is such a shame that they phoned in Dead End, Wild Rider, and Breakdown from a different planet with a lot of lag. Because the first 2 of these almost made me care about Menasor, a feat akin to Sisyphus balancing the boulder atop the mountain. But sadly, it has just rolled back down again. Kickback. Second verse, same as the first, I'm sorry to say. This is another good figure getting listed as a not buy because it's let down by the rest of its team being scraped out of Hasbro's septic tank. The 3 of these kind of look cool together, they have a vibe I really want to love, but when Shrapnel and Bombshell suck so horrendously, it just makes it not worth it unless you only want this guy, who, let's be real, isn't amazing in the first place. It's got a stupidly simple transformation and the alt mode has one pretty serious flaw, but it's a fun, silly thing with good posing. So if his teammates had at least only compromised the alt modes, I could have forgiven it and told you to pick this up, but both of them look so terrible in both modes, so save your money for something more fun. Skids is a buy. A soft buy, but one nonetheless. It's a very standard, normal Transformer. It's kind of like the Siege Sideswipe, where it's the most average a Transformer can be, but in like a good way. Though slightly less good because he's less cool looking and a bit dumpier. So I guess, Sideswipe after 3 kids and the loveless marriage he's destined for. Blaster is not a Legacy figure. Bulkhead is a solid buy. This guy gets so much hate from people who don't have it, and so much, yeah, it's pretty good, from the people who actually bothered to pick him up. Maybe what happened with Skids is that he absorbed all of Bulkhead's dumpiness, which is why he ended up like a bodybuilder rather than his typical too many butterburgers form. Leader Class Galvatron is another Kingdom figure, but you know what? Fuck it. I'm not doing a retrospective, I'm just telling you if something that was in a line is worth buying. So yes, both this and Blaster are worth buying. The Galvatron's only real flaw is a pretty deeply off-model head sculpt, while Blaster sadly doesn't have the articulation to dance any better than Jazz can. Which, it's a vibe, but not like a proficient one. Still, Blaster is more what Legacy Soundwave should have been, and Galvatron is just an all-around banger. Now, Laser Optimus Prime. Much like Legacy, is a great figure to buy one time. There does not need to be like 5 versions of this thing. Get the one that you think looks the coolest and you will be happy. Don't buy a second one because you will stop being happy about as fast as someone who had a head-on collision with a real-life version of this truck mode while not wearing a seatbelt. Then there was Commander Class Motormaster, who is a not buy because the majority of his team sucks, which is a real shame, because this thing is just steps away from greatness. This figure was bringing its all to the fight, like Mike Tyson armed with a baseball bat. But when so much of the combined mode is a complete and desperate failure thanks to the rest of the team flat out not being worth it, then I can't recommend an $80 figure. This is not an 86 Ultra Magnus or potentially even Optimus Prime scenario. The final strength of this figure rides and dies on its larger mode. The last 3 members of this team betrayed Motormaster harder than Starscream betrays Megatron on any given Tuesday. Back to cores, G2 Megatron, I'd say don't buy. The base figure is a really good mold, but do you really want Megatron in his jammies? This looks horrendous. Like, why leave the head the normal colors? He looks like you caught him in his shitty thermal underwear that was supposed to be camo colors, but he bought him off Wish. Core Class Optimus Prime is riding the fence. It's okay. It poses pretty okay, looks okay, transforms okay, has an okay alt mode. The alt mode kind of holds together in a way that makes it feel like moist chewed gum, but this is fine. There are much worse ways to spend $10. Core Shockwave is an absolute buy. Every time I tell people that, someone chimes in, the Combiner Wars version is better. Okay. What bearing does that have on anything? The Thrilling 30 Sandstorm is better than the Legacy one. I still bought the Legacy figure. The Siege Optimus is better than the Earthrise, and I still bought that and the Legacy one too. And who doesn't want a little baby Shockwave that sometimes has trouble standing like his toddler-ass proportions would suggest, who turns into a dreadnought for ants? Why would I not be cool with this? Deluxe Elita. Do not buy. It wants to slit your throat in your sleep and feast on your soul. Why did they make the face so terrifying? Why did they make it look nothing like Elita? Why wasn't I mean enough to this thing in my review of it? All these are questions without answers. Prime Universe Knockout. Hey everyone, do you want a version of Knockout with the perfect alt mode like he would want, and a robot mode that looks 0% like him for no reason other than they just sculpted him wrong for no reason? No? Well, I guess you have your answer then. I may not hate this thing at all, but it's a not buy. Beast Wars Tarantulas. Buy. The weird thing about Legacy is that while it's been mixed for the Prime characters, pretty good to the Armada characters, and middling at best to the G1 characters, almost every one of the Beast Wars figures they've released, with the exception of Silverbolt, have all been so much better than their Kingdom counterparts, with the positive exception of Barney Megatron, that they may as well be an elevated state of being. Then we move on to Decepticon Wild Rider. A figure so trash, I refuse to finish the combiner he came from, because the last figure is a retool of this piece of shit. Don't buy. In fact, if you see, shoot at the bird and walk away. Maybe also pick up and fart on, then place back on shelf. Voyager Geaxis, a weird, ugly figure with a half-finished alt mode and stupid little bat wings on his feet. You know this is an absolute buy. Yeah, I wanted to hate this thing so bad, but I can't. It's just an extremely fun figure with great posing, perhaps the most functional hot rod shoulders ever devised, and a really enjoyable transformation that, yes, kind of results in something a bit bullshitty, but it's the fun kind of bullshitty. This dude is the best parts of the worst parts of the 90s, and you can quote me on that. Then there's a repack of Siege Soundwave. This is a don't buy. Truly, one of Siege's more unfortunate experiments. Like, what if you tried to make Frankenstein out of Igor's corpse? It looks kind of cool, and there is fun to be had with it, but Soundwave seems to consistently turn into a space nothing when he's yet to reach Earth, and the most fun that you can really have with this thing is not doing what the designers wanted you to do. So of all the don't buys on this list, it's probably the softest, but you can skip this one gladly. Blitzwing. I am sick of talking about this piece of shit. Don't buy. It has a good robot mode, and that's the end of that statement. A jet unfit to wipe your ass with, and a tank mode that I flat out don't understand. Like, if you were going for accuracy, I'd still want the tank dick gone, but they weren't going for accuracy, so why is it even here? Do not reward Hasbro with your money for this shit. Titan Class Cybertron Metroplex. Don't buy. I can't say for sure because I didn't buy, but don't buy. The best I ever hear about this thing is that it poses well and is overall okay. Do you really want to spend $200 and several feet of your living space on okay? I think you probably don't. Core Class Bombburst. Don't buy. It's just shitty. If you want a figure that feels like the sensation of your life crumbling beneath you, then go ahead. But even just $10 is more than too much for this half-hearted Halloween mashup that feels like no one at Hasbro actually cared. Core Class Soundwave. Buy. It's basically just a pocket version of the Masterpiece figure, and those words alone should be enough to make you vomit in joy. Deluxe Crankcase. It's kind of a buy. It's a cooler looking version of Skids with way shoddier general QC. If you want that bog standard Transformer while not looking like a dude who subsists entirely off a diet of donut, then this is your guy. Dead End. Don't buy. The second truly shitty member of Menasor. Guy's QC is so bad in alt mode that he looks like he got rear-ended hard enough to give the guy in front of him whiplash, and he combines so badly that he hovers off Menasor's shoulder like a greasy teenager's hand does in photos with any woman who's not his mom. Point blank. Holy shit, do not buy. There have been bad figures from this line. There have been no figures half as bad in this line, and potentially from Hasbro in the last 20 years. This is a hideous, gappy, kludge nightmare of a thing. A vile, rancid carcass of a figure that's about as canny as that animation of Pinocchio who consumes souls. Hasbro's shit the bed so hard with this one, it has melted its way to the center of our planet, where its toxic stink infested our magma-soaked core, and now every time a volcano erupts, it fires out pure diarrhea. Fuck this thing. It might be the worst figure I've ever talked about. Skullgrin, if you buy, do not use the directions to go into alt mode. The result is insulting garbage that they didn't even try on. Fan mode makes this thing infinitely better, but if you don't care for those, then this is an easy not buy. Beast Wars Inferno. Again, why didn't they bring magnificent work like this to Kingdom? A figure that shames that whole line like they weren't even trying. Such a huge boon to give our mechanical, maniacal madman an opening mouth. More figures could really do with something like this. An easy buy that will make most all Beast Wars fans very proud. Armada Starscream, an amazing figure that is absolutely not buy unless you are willing to fix it yourself, thanks to one crushing issue. On like 90% of copies of this thing, the right leg falls off if you so much as dare to use the hip swivel. On like 5% of copies, both legs fall off, and on like the last 5, no legs fall off. Do you want to roll that dice? I have had a fan who took popsicle sticks and glued shards of it into the hip to seal off the mushroom peg so the leg can't get out of place, but not completely freezing the joint doing that is very difficult. So personally, I tell you to steer clear of this thing. Your chances of getting one with both hips working are like your chances of getting struck by lightning. Lastly, Transmetal 2 Megatron. I asked on Twitter what the best leader class of the last decade was, giving no one any prompting, and roughly half of the well over 100 responses that I got were this thing. Nothing else even came close to getting that vote of confidence from the community. And I know why. It's because with the Beast Wars stuff in Legacy, they just tried harder. They just did, for whatever reason. And I'm grateful for it because they slammed out an all-time banger with this guy. An absolutely stunning, glorious, impressive figure, and an easily buy recommendation from me. So Legacy Year 1 had 16 buys and 16 not buys. What's more, not only did this line have an inordinate number of figures that are riding the line between being worth or not worth the money, it also had several of the worst figures of all time, and a couple of the best. I would say that the reek of the bad outweighs the beauty of the good just barely, resulting in a line that overall was almost exactly balanced between the good and the bad, which when you think about it is kind of terrible. You'd really want everything in a toy line to be at least a little good, like you'd really hope that there's not a single rancid stinker in there, and unfortunately there's kind of a lot in Legacy. Anyways, before we go, let's thank a patron. And this time it's Wonder Wagons, with Fall of Cybertron Optimus Prime. And man, War for Cybertron Optimus is right there. For a second I was like, a man of culture I see. But it's the Fall of Cybertron one. It's probably a good toy all the same, but I've never handled it. So unlike the amazing WFC one, I can't comment too much. What's weird is despite the fact that I swear he got bigger in the game, the figure looks to be smaller. I will say that I appreciate the fact that he holds his gun like a sane person and doesn't have a stupid gun hand, but aside from that and the alt mode looking pretty good, that's about all I can say. And ironically, that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.